Hi, I'm Dave Kaneda. Welcome to building rich mobile apps with Sencha Touch. I changed that at the last minute. So that's me, Dave Kaneda. Follow me on Twitter, ask me things, we can joke, talk about Charlie Sheen, whatever. All right, I kind of dove in rather quickly there, but so I'm going to talk about Sencha Touch. It is a JavaScript framework for building rich mobile applications with JavaScript. How many people in here were just at the JQ Touch thing next door? Yeah. Okay, so I wrote JQ Touch a couple years ago. John now maintains it. A little bit of trivia. I actually wrote JQ Touch a block away. I used to live on Front and Market. Philly pride, yeah? Who hates Philly? Come on. It's a cool town. All right. I like New York, too. And it's free, also. Bing. So does everybody kind of get the base concept of creating a web application that feels a little native, that gives you a little bit better usability, that kind of stuff? I saw some nods. I'm going to take that as a yes. All right, so let's look at what Sencha Touch can do. And the last thing over there, you saw a little bit of what JQ Touch does. Sencha Touch really tries to take the whole idea of making a application-styled web page to the next level. It tries to create things that really feel native. So that being said, I have some videos. First one is an app called TravelMate. You can see it has like a little carousel, bottom tab bar. The UI could use a little bit of polish, some padding around that text would be nice, but otherwise, it's a really speedy app, which is really cool for translating text, different languages, and currency and stuff like that. So again, this is all a web page. This is all running in a browser right now. Cool, right? This next one, I think, is the Breaking Development Conference schedule. Breaking Development was a little mobile conference in Dallas just 2 weeks ago. So they built their schedule in JQ Touch, or I'm sorry, in Sencha Touch. If we could just take that out of the video. But as you can see, we could just save it to the home screen. We get a custom icon, a custom startup screen. The app loads quickly, and it feels native, right? Like, that doesn't feel like a web page. We have the A to Z index bar, a little loading spinner. We can show tweets, a little custom pop-up menu, Google Maps. Pretty cool. Oh, and this I love. They just added this into Google Maps. So now in web apps, you can actually do the street view, and works like beautifully in Sencha Touch. So that's one app. I tend to think conference schedules just make for like a really great demo of what it can do. But I'll get into that a little more in a second. I have another demo that we can actually look at some code. How many developers here right now? That is awesome. So I was so scared when I came here because I don't typically like coming to the enterprise events because I feel like I'm talking to a lot of C-level guys and whatever, and they're there to find out their business strategy for the upcoming quarter. So hopefully we can like geek out a little bit later, like look at some code. That's what I like to do. This one, Irresistible. I promise this whole thing isn't just demos. This is the last one. Just 3, I swear. This is a friend of mine. He runs a food delivery service in the UK, Irresistible. So he built this app in about a week, I think, on top of his desktop web app. Look over here for 1 second, because you can actually see my password in this demo. I have to edit this video really bad. But I love that CSS animation at the end. He actually built that animation with another one of our products, Sencha Animator. But yeah, again, all web, all CSS, HTML, JavaScript. So this sort of brings us to where I see Sencha Touch fitting in this whole web versus native thing. And I actually credit John Stark, who runs JQ Touch, with saying this. We are kind of like the sweet spot between web and native. So there are a lot of advantages you get out of doing a native application and just certain methodologies in the native mindset. Things like bringing your application sort of structure and style and all of that onto the device, and then only going to the server to get things like data when you need to. And then, of course, you get the whole array of like why the web is great, right? Like developers are cheaper, they're easier to find, you can deploy to more devices. If you saw Dave's talk earlier on PhoneGap, you know, Netflix deploys to some absurd number of devices every 2 weeks. Does anybody know how many? I'm like asking for facts as I present. I think it's like 100 some. I don't know. Anyway, native also just has this like connotation of like a certain level of richness, a certain level of usability. That first demo we saw of TravelMate, you have two spinners side by side when you're picking which languages you're translating. That is, I wouldn't say, you know, it's 100% the best ever, but that is a far better UX than, you know, some traditional web app, you know, without JavaScript running. You need rich interfaces like that to accomplish good apps. Anything else I missed here? No, you know, web's better in a lot of ways. And something my friend Brian said at Dallas at the Breaking Development Conference, details matter. So, you know, I was talking to a guy in Boston a couple weeks ago, and he said, you know, I love the whole web idea. I love the thought of doing things for web. But he's like, you know, if my app doesn't feel native, doesn't feel like it belongs to stand next to Twitter for iPhone or Facebook for iPhone, he's like, my company's dead in the next 6 months. And that's something I totally agree with, and I feel pretty compassionate for. Details matter, the feel of the app matters. Of course, it matters what vertical you're in, what market you're in, what you're trying to accomplish with your app. But these things do matter, these details. Serving up a simple page with HTML with, you know, H1s for your heading and styling it pretty, putting it in PhoneGap can get you so far, but it depends who you're competing with and what you want to be. If you want to compete with Gowalla, you know, you can't put out an app like that. It has to feel rich. So that being said, I just want to take a quick look at the things we support in Sencha Touch, and then we'll talk a little bit about what Sencha Touch actually brings to the table. Of course, the iOS family that we all know and love. The 1,000,000,001 Androids that are out already and coming out this year. And of course, we have like 1 billion more Android tablets coming out. There's a lot of Androids out there. And then now we just recently, about 2 weeks ago, I think, announced Sencha Touch 1.1, which supports BlackBerry 6. Including the Playbook, their tablet, and the Torch. And they're about to, I think, come out with a new Torch, which is supposed to be even more amazing. So that being said, going to get a little geeky on like what we actually do in our framework. So a couple people have referenced this so far. I think John Stark did, Dave Johnson. One of the most powerful things we bring with the framework is just the abstraction of the touch event layer. By default, if anybody has tried to develop touch-based applications in the browser, by default you get 4 events. You get touch start, touch move, touch cancel, and touch end, which are not that useful, surprisingly. So we actually abstract all those things. We delegate them to the document level, and one which gives you a big boost in performance. If you're assigning sort of, you know, mouse move events on every row in your list, your app's going to get really slow really fast. So we actually delegate it all to the document, and then you combine to our custom events. And then on top of that, we add in a whole bunch of events that we find useful or normal, things like tap, double tap, tap and hold, swipe, pinch, rotate, all those types of things. So those are like a little more common, like things that you would want to bind to, a swipe gesture, for example. Why those aren't included by default, I'm not quite sure. Oh, I got a tweet. Awesome. Nice. I'm going to move this down now. So then on top of that touch event layer, the next sort of level up is the scrolling layer. And how many people know what I'm talking about when I say fake scrolling or momentum, accelerated scrolling on Safari, WebOS? Yeah, okay. So for the rest, because that was actually not that many, there is no position fixed in mobile Safari. There is no overflow auto. Actually, that's not entirely true. Android recently added position fixed, but it's kind of hackish, and it doesn't work that well. So the big thing here is like when you're dealing with an app, in the most common scenario, you want a header at the top and you want a tab bar at the bottom, and you want a list inside the middle that scrolls without the other two pieces scrolling. So we did that, and we kind of faked it in JavaScript. So this list right now that's scrolling, even with the grouped headers, the little pinheads that sort of knock each other out as they move, the bounce at the ends, we faked all of that with a few algorithms in JavaScript. And just to show again, I think we did a really good job. It feels native. Those of you who are used to this problem or who have seen this problem, there are other solutions out there. There's one called iScroll Glove Box. Is Dave in the room? No. But I think ours feels the most native. It has the right bounce. I won't go on too far about it, but the important thing about this is it's used throughout the entire library. It's basically what allows us to do a flexible layout system. It gives us sort of a native feeling carousel, spinner, elements like that. And I should mention it is critical for tablets. An app on a tablet which does not have individually scrolling regions is fairly worthless. I'm just going to throw that out there. And so then we have components, and this is sort of what everybody kind of gawks at. This is like the eye candy, but we have a whole set of widgets, everything from buttons to a whole ton of form elements, spinners. I can actually pull up this demo in a little bit and give you a better sample. Excuse me. And then, of course, we wrap a few of the HTML5 native elements to give you an easier API for things like HTML5 video, audio, stuff like that. And then the last piece, or my favorite piece that I want to talk about, is the theming system. So this was sort of my biggest contribution to the framework. The theming is totally flexible. It's based, of course, on CSS3, which is available on all these devices. But then we've taken it a step further and abstracted that CSS with a technology called Sass and another one called Compass. How many people have heard of Sass or Compass or both? Awesome, yeah. It's getting more popular lately, which I'm a big fan of. I'll give a little demo on what this looks like in a bit, but just to throw out there, you can change a few base variables to globally and sweepingly change the look of your application. We include over 300 icons that you can optionally include in your style sheet by default, which I think is really important because icons for mobile are much more important than they are for desktop. Limited screen size. And then the other cool thing is all of our themes are resolution independent. So that was one of the sort of wackier things we did with the theming system. And I have a blog post on this on the Sencha blog, but we did make all of the themes or the CSS resolution independent. So we actually changed the scale of the elements in our UI based on the pixel density of the device you're looking at. So for example, the iPhone 4, everybody knows the Retina display has an extremely dense pixel density, 320 ppi. Whereas some of the Androids have high ones, but not that high. They're about 180 most of the time. And then the iPad is actually the worst with like 132 ppi. So we actually looked at all these devices, put them all next to each other. And by default, because of the different pixel density, you would actually get different size elements on every device. But we figure, a button is meant to be tappable by a finger. It's meant to be a certain size physically, not in pixels that are sort of relative. And so we actually made it so that all of our elements size the exact same way physically across all devices. And then, of course, a whole animation set, a lot of which we took from JQ Touch originally. And then we get into some of the more nitty-gritty features, which you know, don't quite have the sex appeal of things like components and a fun spinner. But if you guys have done applications, like real application work, and not just sort of websites or, you know, basic PHP CMS or something, but when you get into sort of the application mindset and you're dealing with data consumption and readers and writers and things like that, this stuff matters, and it actually helps a lot. And this was sort of my biggest learning thing as I moved into Sencha as well. I have sort of more of a web design, web development background. Excuse me. But anyway, we include like a super rich data package where you can easily set up data models, data stores that sort of consume web services, whether they're JSON, your REST API, XML, whatever, RSS. Bring it in to a data store, and then actually just bind that data store to components, like a list or an edit screen, things like that. And then also we have a little offline package as well that helps you take the data then offline, so you can actually take an entire web application offline. And that sort of speaks to my general point, is that aside from, you know, the theming and the widgets, which are all great to look at, the coolest part about Sencha Touch is it is an entire application framework. So you get things like client-side MVC, you get client-side associations, so you could actually say things like has many, belongs to, all in JavaScript. Device detection, orientation events. I guess this became my sort of et cetera slide, but we have a lot of features. We'll just put it that way. So that being said, is it cool if we look at some code? Is that all right? All right. We'll just hope the demo gods are with us today. Why is my desktop white? That's wacky. Now let's go you. Okay, so here's another conference app. This one's for O'Reilly. This is actually included in the distribution if you download Sencha Touch. By the way, all the links, all the mentions, all that stuff, I have one link where you can get everything after this, so don't worry about, you know, writing down, taking photos, whatever. Although I understand if you want to take photos. So this is obviously where that breaking development, they kind of took this and pirate patched it for their conference, but so I'm just going to start with this. Ignore the fact that there are two active ones. And so again, sort of rich UX. As you can see, right now I'm just running in Chrome, in desktop Chrome. Because it's a WebKit browser, I can just run apps here. We are an entirely web framework, so it makes it really easy for, well, that was a bad example. Debugging. So, you know, if I wanted to style something or change something, I can just dive into the DOM and take a look at how things are being done. I can use the console if I'd like, all that sort of stuff, sort of within an app environment. All right, so I'm just demoing. So I have here's it running on the device. Right, feels native, right? So just to take a peek at what this code looks like. So how many people here have written JavaScript? Oh, that is sweet. I don't just mean including jQuery, by the way. You need like a little more. But no, that's a good sign. So then this shouldn't be too scary. I could see this being scary to some sort of, you know, there are web designers out there who will just include jQuery, include their, you know, carousel.js or whatever, or JQ Touch, and you can do a lot with just HTML and classes. This is much more of like a programmatic API, and in that sense, it can be a learning curve from the traditional web background. On the other hand, if you've dealt with things like Java or even Objective-C, although this is way better, or especially Flash. I mean, Flash, ActionScript 3, and our sort of API style is very similar. So it's basically just ECMAScript, JavaScript. It's object-oriented, so you can see at the top. I'm not going to go too far into detail, but just some high-level things. I'm creating an object called a session list, and to do that, I'm extending a regular panel. Can everybody see that, by the way, pretty clearly? Is that all right? So you can see within that panel, I'm then creating a list, right? I'm saying it's grouped, which gives you, these little headers for the times. And then I'm saying that group string is actually coming out of our JSON is the pretty time attribute. The proxy is where we're getting our data from. That's sort of our data endpoint. So you can see that we're using a script tag proxy, which is basically saying JSON P. Here's the API endpoint. Some cache stuff so that it's not caching right now. And that the root node is called proposals. And so then automatically, it will go get the JSON, go look through the proposals node for all of the items within, and then just assign this template or put that data into this template. And those are the list items. So this is literally the entire way we've created that list on that page. Aside from that, we have an event, so we're saying on selection change, we're going to fire this on select event. I'll show that in a second. We throw the whole thing into a panel. I forget why. I think just so that this title can remain here, and this button bar with the split buttons can actually swap out when we change the screen or something. I forget. But anyway, on here, we're just processing some data, setting up the buttons for that split button where we have the dates. We add those into a toolbar with a gray UI. We'll look at that in a second. Again, the advanced layout system, so we're able to say, take those buttons, make them stretch, but pack them center. So you can see like here, granted, because they're stretched, it doesn't really matter how they were packed anyway, but on here, right, you can see it's automatically being stretched to the viewport. So even though it wasn't built to be, this app actually works pretty well on tablets, which is kind of cool. This works quite well on an iPad, actually. So back to that change date item. So for example, the event for when you click on one of these guys, ignore, don't look behind this. Okay, is change date, so that's the only event that fires once you click one of those buttons. And as you can see, we're not dealing with sort of clearing out DOM or manipulating elements or anything like that. We're simply saying, take the store that the list is bound to, and right now it's a sub-object of the list, but it could be an external, we could be getting it from somewhere else. Just take that store, clear any filter that's already been set on that store. The filter, we're just filtering by day, basically. And then refilter it based on the date. And then I have a thing that says scroll to the top. But that's pretty simple, right? Again, it's a different mindset than if you were doing something, let's say with jQuery, where you would then want to clear out the list or the UL or whatever, clear out the DOM, go through your data, recreating DOM, and then append that back in. Here, we're really just dealing with data and components. And of course, that also comes with like a component lifecycle. So you have before destroy, you have destroy events, all that kind of stuff. Is all of this making sense? Is this am I going too far off the geek board? Okay, cool. So, yeah, geek board, I just made that up. So now I'm going to look at the theming for a moment. You can see it is basically CSS. Everybody know CSS? It's my favorite language. So, except we have a few extra things, like we have variables, we have some weird looking include things. So basically, what we're able to do is, and I should have brought this up earlier, but we have some docs for this, which I'll find another time. I'll throw it on that page with links later. But basically, we include some predefined mixins or functions in Sass, predefined mixins and predefined variables, which can affect sort of the overall style of our themes. So basically, you can override some of those variables if you'd like, and then you include our theme library. This actually isn't needed because we brought that in by default, but I'm going to leave it just in case. And then you include the components you want. So you can actually come in here and say, I'm not using any message boxes in my app. So I'm just going to turn that off. And it'll just strip out all the CSS that would be included for those components. Another thing to point out, we actually embed all of the icons as base64 into the base64 strings into the CSS, which is really good for mobile in terms of latency. You're not making multiple requests. Ideally, in our ideal environment, when you're pulling up a Sencha Touch app, you're loading 2 files, which are one JavaScript file, which includes all of the framework and all of your app compacted, minified into one file, and then one CSS file, which has all of your images, all of your styles, basically the entire theme in one file. And that's it. No image links, no anything else. Kind of hard to get around, including Google Maps if you're doing that. But aside from that, really just 2 files we want to be loading when we're doing Sencha Touch apps. Yeah, so let's just take a look at some of the variables. So just to back up a second, Sass is a compiled language. So basically, you write in this format, which looks like CSS, but is really Sass, and then you compile your style sheet into a CSS file. So you can see we're doing that right now in the terminal. Basically, I could just do compass. So I'm in my resources folder for this app. I could do compass compile SCSS, and it's just going to look at that SCSS file, regenerate a CSS file, and put it in the CSS folder. But we can also have it just watch that file or that folder for any changes, which is the easier way to do it. So I can come here, come look at a variable like base color, right? And let's say, and this is important for companies because or especially events, like if you're changing your brand or you're modifying a certain look, it's good to be able to do this stuff quickly. I can say, without doubt, Objective-C or the iOS way of doing things, Interface Builder, doesn't come close to this level of dynamic quality. So let's say we're running another conference based off the same app, but we're updating it for next year, and this conference is green. Right? We can just change that, save our file, come back to the demo, and presto changeo, our app is green. Right? So the toolbar is green now. You can even see this little icon here is green. The highlight color is turned green. Right? Even all of the little textures and gradients within the back button has all been created for you, and all with CSS3 using gradients, borders, box shadows, text shadows, things like that. The spinner is green, the pop-up box is green. Granted, we include about 50 variables, so you can get a lot more specific. I'm just showing to show what's possible in terms of the variables. Maybe you don't always want to be changing like every color in the application. But that's pretty cool, right? Right? No, I'm sorry. There we go. So another cool little variable we have is include highlights, which we sort of created for debugging. CSS3 can be a bit of a burden on performance. So we created this variable to be able to quickly and easily turn off all gradients, text shadows, and box shadows. Some people actually like the look of this. I've yet to see an app in production which actually uses this variable, but this is a cool one for debugging. And then we also have a bunch, like you could do things like base gradient, right? So if we wanted our app to feel a little more like iOS, and I'm just going to switch to orange just for the hell of it. iOS, everything's glossy, so if we wanted ours to feel a little bit more along those lines, we could just say base gradient glossy, and everything's glossy, right? Can you guys see that? Hey, duck, get out of here. And then you could even come in and fine tune it. You could say, I think it's list header base gradient, matte, if you didn't want these things to be glossy. But you can see even the selected states of things are glossy now. So I think that's it for my demo. Just want to give you guys sort of like a high-level thing. But that's extremely themable. What's something else I could show here? Hold on. So also, just to come back to like some of that data stuff, in the session list here, this is where we point out the proxy, where we say where we're getting our data from. But you will see that the whole data store is using the proposal model. Excuse me. And I'm defining my models here. We have one called proposal. You can see we have a has-many relationship to speakers. So at O'Reilly, they have like a lot of panel events. So one event or one session could have a lot of speakers. One speaker at the same time could have a lot of sessions that they're giving. So we have a has-many both ways. And then just some basic, we're just defining sort of what fields we're using, that kind of thing. It's really simple. Of course, there are some extra functions and APIs that you can do with models that do a lot of auto-magic stuff, but this is a pretty basic situation. So the cool thing about that is we can automatically say, if I click on Brian Aker, never mind. If I click on, Dion's got to have something. Dion, oh, never mind. Sorry, I went the wrong way. If I go click on a session, I can see the speakers for that session right underneath. I actually took out the other way around because O'Reilly wanted it. But anyway, and I'm sure if we click around enough, we could find a panel with multiple speakers. But this was super easy. So basically, once I loaded this record, Reinventing Webmail, I automatically had the speaker data associated to it by the framework, which again is very powerful stuff when you're looking at sort of richer, more comprehensive, dynamic data-based applications. That was the longest run-on possible. All right, I'm going to go back into presentation mode. Do we have any? Yeah.
So is it required that we use this sort of client-side like architecture, like framework model? Or
No.
Pass those models in as JSON?
Yeah. I mean, the data models and stores and stuff, I would definitely recommend using because it's very little overhead compared to doing a basic AJAX call, and you can bind it to any component or form or whatever data you're getting, like super easily. The one thing I will say is not everybody wants to use MVC as their sort of application architecture, and that you could definitely not do. I mean, this one, as a great example, is not MVC based. Aside from using data models, yeah, I guess that's the big difference is we use the term models or the thought of data models as something that relates to our data structure, and in that sense it is pretty necessary or useful. In terms of like views and controllers, do it however you want. We have an MVC methodology, which is actually getting a big ramp up soon, but otherwise, this one was just done with base classes. We're just extending a panel here. Do we have any other questions about the code stuff before I keep going? Yeah.
I got a question about design and like how Sencha Touch relates to Next.js. I mean, now with tablets, and you're running this in Chrome on desktop. Like, how do you see like those two platforms kind of converging? Why should I have to design two separate apps for the desktop browser conference and the mobile?
Yeah.
Or is the Touch UI design kind of becoming more accepted as something we see this is in the regular basis?
Yeah, so the question was about sort of, the company, my company, Sencha, also has another product called XJS, which creates desktop web applications. And sort of where is that split happening? At what point do those things come together? Because this running in Chrome, aside from having to click and drag, is not the worst experience, right? This isn't entirely unacceptable as an application. So I think we're always going to, or for the foreseeable future, we're going to keep those as two separate things. One thing about Sencha Touch is it's all built around WebKit right now and sort of HTML5, CSS3 progressive technologies, whereas we really strive to go all the way back to IE6 on the desktop and actually do 100% compatibility. But aside from that compatibility, I see where you're going, and we're actually in the process right now of abstracting out from our own frameworks sort of this platform, which is now included in both, is actually the exact same code base in Sencha Touch and XJS. Well, okay, not true right now, but it will be very soon. We're in the process of it. And so that code base includes MVC, and it includes the data package. And we might throw a few other things in there. But essentially, that is where I sort of see the ideal stuff happening, is when you can write your models, views, and controllers the same client side on both platforms or every platform, the same data stuff, your models, your stores, whatever proxies. But I always kind of think you will always have different UI widgets in different contexts, right? Like you don't want a spinner on the desktop. And you always kind of want different views, kind of. That's like a hazy ground. So I really like where we're going with it. I think as we sort of come to Touch 2.0, which I'll talk a little bit more about later, we're going to get a lot closer. But I think they'll stay sort of separate frameworks for a while. Any other code type questions? Yeah.
What is the, you got to show us briefly explain, what is the server-side code?
For this app, so there is no server-side code, aside from the JSON feed, right? Hold on one second. So that's the big thing, is and my buddy James Pierce actually does a better presentation on the overall sort of web versus native thing. We're just big proponents of stuff moving to the client. Data, your REST API, whatever, that lives in the cloud, on the server, whatever. But your application logic, your controllers, your, all that stuff, your theme, should all live on the client in our minds. So this is the server-side aspect of that app, is a URL on the Web 2.0 Expo and a whole bunch of JSON. Do you guys know what JSON is? Okay, because I've thrown it out about 100 times by now. Just a data format, but way better for web apps than XML. I won't go too far into that, but yeah, that's the server-side piece. Any others before I move on? I'll take a few more at the end, but yeah.
Comparing web versus native, going back there, certain applications you can do not recommend doing this kind of frameworks.
Yeah, I mean.
Things that you don't have access to native databases, native APIs.
I wouldn't do Angry Birds with web tech quite yet. Although my buddy James Pierce is, I think, trying right now, or actually Tiny Wings, I think he's going to redo. Yeah, I mean, games are a big obvious one. Yeah, I mean, you have things like Canvas, you have WebGL is, on its way or whatever. I actually think it'll get there. I mean, personally, we could talk more about this later. I'm like a evangelist zealot. Like, I think 5 years from now, web is the platform. I think everything, all the pieces are there. We have the bitmap stuff, we have the vector stuff, we have the 3D stuff. It's just all in its infancy compared to even things like Flash or native technologies, core data, core image, core animation, are all just so much further along. But there's a definite effort, and that's kind of what I put under that umbrella of HTML5. Sorry, I don't have a slide for this, but I gotta show the pride. You know, that's kind of what I see that HTML5 movement as meaning, is bringing that application stuff that's always lived in these other places into actual specs for the web. But anyway, I won't go too far off that. Troll bait, no.
What about being like for Android, all the fields and make it look like it's, you know, as close to an iPhone app as it can be?
So,
There's no legal comments around that? As far as
I didn't hear that. I believe the question was about, do we have other styles for Android and BlackBerry? The answer is yes. I don't know about the other stuff, so I'm just not going to comment. Why this one is black right now, I don't know. Oh, I was testing something, sorry. All right, it's too late now. Let's just go past it. I have a black and red iOS theme for some reason. So in our most recent release, 1.1, we actually include a switcher, which I don't know why you keep saying Apple, because it's our Cupertino theme. We do have a theme that is very specific to this blue style. Then we have one called Mountain View, which is specific to this darker style. So that one's pretty close, right, to what you're looking for? I mean, pretty much the biggest thing that you want to get rid of at this point is the back button, and do that with our history support. And we are considering possibly doing a component that sort of detects the environment and hides the back button for you. But yeah, I mean, and just to point out also, these custom themes, everybody gets what these custom themes are accomplishing, right? These all ship with the framework. We also have Toronto, where we've stripped out all of the gradients and all that kind of stuff for performance, because certain devices don't have GPUs, right? Yeah, that's not fun to look at. Hold on. So while we're here also, might as well take a quick look at the kitchen sink. This is just sort of our big demo that shows all of our sort of features, widgets, all that kind of stuff all at once. So I was saying, you know, we're really rich. You can come here. This is available on our website. It's available in the download. And it'll actually show you the source for each demo. It's pulling the source code live via an AJAX request. So it's always up to date. Again, just to look at how rich some of this stuff is, we have native feeling checkboxes. We have the spinner with friction, with momentum. All right, we have the popovers. Sliders. Toolbar form fields. Our lists, we have the group list with the headers. Sorry, this is just going to become a laundry list of features now, but it's fun to play with. Disclosure buttons. These are some of the icons that we were talking about that are included. And again, you can sort of optionally decide to bring in up to 300 more. So it's basically the entire Pictos icon set. We got a special license. Carousels always feel really nice. Vertical. Again, the source code for this is crazy simple. Right, these are the 3 cards. I don't know if you can see in each one. Top tabs, bottom tabs. Our map, which I'm on my tethering right now, so that's going to be slow. And then these guys are pretty cool. You would never use this guy on a tablet. This is more of a phone thing. But the action sheet, overlays, you know, oh, ignore that. This is my dev copy, by the way, if you haven't noticed. Anyway, So yeah, very rich stuff, very accessible. And also, all right, and then I really have to go back to the presentation stuff. Ignore the file name. We really were supposed to change those. You can see those themes, though, those custom themes that we include with the framework are really like less than 100 lines of CSS. So because of the abstraction, because of this SaaS, we can actually build custom themes that we ship with the framework on top of the base theme, which is pretty cool. I think the other one, this one's only 30 lines, right? We just override 6 variables and then include the framework, and then that's our custom theme. Anyway, back to it. Wow, I usually finish in like a half an hour. This is awesome. Actually taking up the time. So we have a ton of resources. It is a rich framework. It does have a lot of features. We have API docs. I'll show you links to this stuff later. We have forums that are super active. I think we have about 200,000 forum members. We have a Learn section, which is being worked on all the time, lots of guides and resources. Then, of course, if you want to take your app offline, you can use PhoneGap. I won't go too far into that because you guys seem like you guys kind of get it, as opposed to some other conferences I've been to. Generally, do we all get what PhoneGap does? Yeah? All right, I'm seeing nods. Okay, 2.0 coming up. This is our next Sencha Touch release. We might do another point release before this, I'm not sure. But the big things that are included, optimized build. So the same way that you can sort of manually pull something out of your CSS and say, I'm not using message boxes, don't include that CSS, our new builder tool will actually scan your code. This is the batshit crazy part. It'll actually launch a background sort of browser with your code running without, sort of all headless. You don't see it. See all of the dependencies that your app requires, and then create a build of your app that's one file, one JavaScript file, minified, with nothing that you don't use. So if you don't use carousels, it'll automatically take out the carousels. If you don't access a certain data API, it basically just creates the perfect build for your app. This is going to be insanely awesome, especially for mobile. This is actually already in XJS, which we just released 2 days ago. Improved MVC, again, that's in XJS right now. It's going to get a lot better in Touch very soon. We're doing a charting package right now, again, based off of our desktop charting package. Some dynamic loading stuff, improved history support, all that kind of stuff, on the way for 2.0. And one more thing. We are working on a desktop sort of tool so that you can drag and drop build your UIs together, which is going to be awesome. Sort of like interface builder for Sencha Touch, but should be more powerful. So we're also hiring. If this stuff seems interesting to you, sorry to all the companies if companies sent your developers here, but we need you. No, if you find this stuff interesting, mobile, even on the desktop, just sort of pushing the web to its limit, trying to get web experiences feeling as appish as possible, let me know. See our website. Again, check out the link when we're done. Oh, and also if you thought the theming stuff was cool, we're running a contest right now. I think we're giving away MacBook Air, yeah, a couple iPads, playbooks. So all you basically have to do for our theme contest, we have an app already built. It's off the Dribbble API. Not for the non-designers in the room. Dribble's like a little design sharing app. All you have to do is give us the CSS file for the app, which we've already made, and we'll just evaluate it. We have a couple sort of internal judges that are going to take a look. You can use Sass, like I've shown, or you could actually just write plain CSS. So that's it. Thanks for coming. And I'll do questions now for a little. I don't know how much time I have. I'm already out? All right, cool. Yeah.
Tyler, what platforms does that support for the SaaS? Or is that just no?
So
That's not Sencha.
it's not Sencha, but just so you know, SAS and Compass are both Ruby gems. So Ruby comes on Mac. It's kind of a pain in the ass on Windows, but who uses that anyway? Just kidding, enterprise guys. No. Anyone else? Yeah.
Hey, can I swap in less instead of that?
No, less is so much worse. I mean, you can, but I mean, we don't. You know, we don't have our theming structure on less as well, and less. It's just the color functions aren't nearly as good. Like to do a color function in less, you actually just say like, you know, pound 111 plus pound 666. Like, what does that even mean in color theory? Like, I like having lighten, saturate, desaturate, all that. Yeah.
So what is phone gap performance like for one of the apps?
I mean, I've seen it very good. I hear people asking things. I guess the thing is with the startup time, and we need to look at some way to optimize that. There was some talk in a couple of the sessions so far about that relating to file size, which isn't necessarily the case. I mean, the big benefit of PhoneGap is basically it's like an automatic cache manifest, right? Like all of your files are automatically offline available. The big issue is the startup, the reading of that JavaScript file, sort of the parsing it into something via the browser. I don't know. We'll have to take a look at it. But I mean, we have a bunch of apps on the App Store that are written in Sencha Touch and PhoneGap, and I mean, they've looked great to me, and I'm pretty critical. So, but I think we will be taking a look at how to improve that. I think generally, in terms of Touch 2.0, I'm sure we might look at some new components or whatever, but the big push is going to be performance for both embedded and just web. Yeah.
Are there any conventions for automated acceptance testing?
I don't even know what that means. I'm so sorry. I don't know about acceptance testing. I mean, in terms of unit testing, I'm just totally talking out my ass now. We use Jasmine. Does that help answer something? Is that close to an answer? We use Jasmine for our test suite. Yeah, we could talk more. Oh, so we are working on sort of a our own visual test tool. It gets hard with this stuff because really you want to be doing it on device. You know, like we already have it for desktop and we can use it on touch, but it's just not that reliable. I mean, it's hard to achieve consistency between 5 different Androids that are all running the exact same OS. All on 2.2, you'll get different, you know, user behavior or different behavior from the OS for something like form fields across every single one, just because they've customized their, you know, Android UI or whatever. There is a company called Device Anywhere. It might be a little expensive. I think it's about $2,000 to get a dedicated machine, but Device Anywhere actually backwards engineered all of the devices. So they send you like a box, you know, like a server rack, server box with like the device hanging by a thread inside, hooked up to like all these cords, and it actually hooks into, you know, like a desktop GUI type thing where you can say click here, then expect a big red button here, or expect this to show up in the DOM now, and it all works. It's just, you know, to get a solid testing environment, you'd want at least like around 10 Androids, you know, a handful of iPod Touches, and you know, a couple tablets. So you're looking at about 30 to 40,000 for your base testing layer. Yeah, it's expensive. Anyone else? Questions? All right, thanks.